Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Dear student, Assalamu alaikum. Class 10th, subject physics, chapter number 13, electrostatic. We are doing. Topic of today's lecture will be 13.8, which is on page number 82 and 83. I repeat, class 10, subject physics, chapter number 13. As we are doing electrostatics. The name of the chapter is electrostatics. Topic of today's lecture is 13.8, which the topic name is different type of capacitors. Please open page number 82 as we are going to start 13.8 different types of capacitors. This is the chapter we are doing, unit 13, electrostatics. Name of the chapter is electrostatics, unit number 13. Different types of capacitors, as I told you, which is on page number 82. Please open page number 82. Different types of capacitors. So actually, we have different types of capacitors, and why we make different types of capacitors? Because they use in different devices. We cannot use all type of capacitor, one type of capacitor in every device. We use different types of capacitors according to space they occupied, because the capacitor stores the charge. Capacitors, some capacitors store the charge, so they have multiple use, but mainly they are designed for storing the charge. So we have different types of capacitors. Capacitors have different types depending upon their construction and nature of the dielectric used in them. As you know, when we discussed the topic capacitor, I told you we use the two plates parallel. These are called the parallel plates, and between these two plates we use the dielectric. Dielectric could be air, sheet, paper, uh, different types of dielectric we use. So, so we have different types of capacitors they use in different devices. So capacitors have different types depending upon their construction and nature of the dielectric field. As I told you, dielectric is between these two places. We place the dielectric between these two places. It could be air, it could be sheet, different types of dielectric we use. When we go further ahead, I will explain you what type of dielectric we use. So first of all, if you look at the figure 13.6, this is paper capacitor. Then we have mica capacitor, MIC mica capacitor. In 13.17, we have a mica capacitor. Then we have a variable capacitor. Then we have a electrolytic capacitor. So we have different types of capacitors. So one is paper capacitor, because the sheet is used between uh, between the plates, parallel plates. There are the two plates, and the sheet is used. That is paper is used. This is called paper capacitor. So mica capacitor is another type, and then we have mica capacitors. Then we have variable capacitors and electrolytic capacitors. So first of all, I introduce you with the paper capacitor, which you can see figure 13.6. This is the paper capacitor. What is paper capacitor? Paper capacitor is an example of fixed capacitor. What does this mean? This means the value of capacitance we cannot change. We cannot change its value. So whatever the value is made by the constructor, we cannot change. If it is 2 microfarad, it means we cannot go for 3 microfarad, we cannot go for 1 microfarad. It is a fixed type of capacitor that is called, if its value is 5 microfarad, it is a fixed type of capacitor because we cannot vary its value capacitance. 4 microfarad, 3 microfarad, so we cannot do this. Or we cannot go further ahead, 6 microfarad, 7 microfarad, 8 microfarad. If it is of 5 microfarad, it will be of 5 microfarad. We cannot change this type of capacitor. Is called the fixed capacitor, whose capacitance we cannot change. The paper capacitor has a cylindrical shape. It has a cylinder type. If you see the shape of this paper capacitor, it is cylinder type. Usually an oiled or greased paper or thin plastic sheet is used as dielectric. I told you when we studied the construction of the capacitors, I told you we use two plates, and in between these two plates, we use a dielectric. And the dielectric could be greased paper, thin plastic sheet, or can be used between these two plates, between two aluminum foils. The paper or plastic sheet is firmly rolled in the form of cylinder. The paper which is between these two plates, between two foil, it is firmly rolled. You can see it is rolled. The paper or plastic sheet is firmly rolled in the form of cylinder, and they made a cylinder and then enclosed into the plastic and enclosed in the plastic case. So we have made this type of capacitor. We use the paper, greased oil, paper or thin plates as a dielectric between these two plates, and they can be rolled. This type of capacitor is called uh, paper capacitor, and is a fixed type of capacitor. Now I'm moving towards next one, which is called mica capacitor, mica capacitor. This is the, you can see in figure 13.17, you can see this is the type of mica capacitor. This is another type of mica capacitor, and this type we will discuss when we discuss the variable capacitor. But right now I'm on mica capacitor, as we have discussed paper capacitor. So now we are discussing mica capacitor. This is the mica capacitor. These two 13.17 and 13.18 is the mica capacitor. First, mica capacitor is another example of fixed capacitor. As you know, paper capacitor is a fixed type of capacitor. Similarly, mica capacitor is also a fixed type of capacitor. We cannot change its capacitance. It is like paper capacitor, but the only difference is we use the different dielectric. That's why the name is different. Mica capacitor. This name is not paper capacitor, because in paper capacitor we use the greased oil or paper sheet, a sheet of paper used, a plastic sheet we use in as a dielectric. That's why it is called paper capacitor. But in mica capacitor, we use different types of dielectric. Like thin mica sheet is used. That's why its name is mica capacitor. We use the, and mica is which is a dielectric between two metal plates. Since mica is very fragile means it can be broken very quickly. So fragile like window mirror or mirror is a very fragile. So similarly, mica is very fragile. It can be easily broken. So that's why it is enclosed in the plastic case or in the case of some insulator. Wires attached to plates project out of the case. Yes, you can see the wires is taking out for the connection. These are the wires. You can see these are the wires. So these are the wires which can be taken out from the mica capacitor for the sake of the connection. If the capacitor is to be increased, if a large number of plates is used up. If, for example, if we want to increase its capacitance from 2 microfarad to 10 microfarad or 100 microfarad, if we want to increase its capacitance, we need to add more plates. Large number of plates is piled up. So many plates are piled up if we want to increase its capacitance. So, I mean, mica capacitor, you should remember this. This is another type of fixed type of capacitor. Fixed type of capacitor, we cannot change its capacitance. So the only thing, and the dielectric between the plates is used is mica sheet, and mica sheet is very fragile. And after enclosed in the plastic sheet, two wires are coming out of them. You can see the two wires are coming out of mica, this wire and this wire and this wire and this wire. So for the sake of the connection. If we want to increase the capacitance, so number of plates will be piled up. Number of plates will be added. Now we are moving towards another type of capacitor, which is the third type of capacitor. You can see on figure 13.19. Figure 13.19 is the type of variable capacitor. The third type, first of all, we studied paper capacitor. We use paper or greased or paper or thin plastic sheet. And then we studied mica capacitors, whose same fixed value as capacitor value fixed like paper capacitor. But I'm moving towards the variable capacitor. we can vary. Variable means we can vary its capacitance. We can go for its capacitance is not fixed like in other two capacitors, as I have already discussed, paper capacitor, meter capacitor. This is a type of fixed capacitor. We cannot change its capacitance because whatever the constructor had made, so we the capacitance we cannot change it. If it is 5 microfarad, it will remain 5 microfarad. Its capacitance we cannot change. But in case of variable capacitors, we can change its capacitance. For example, it is 5 microfarad. In markets, 5 microfarad to 100 microfarad, we can capacitance is available. If we want in a circuit 10 microfarad in a circuit, then we there is a knob over there. There is a knob on this variable capacitors. You can see on the edge we have a very knob coming out of variable capacitor. If we rotate this knob, we can change its capacitance in the circuit. For example, in some electronic circuit, we require 10 microfarad capacitance. So with the help of this handle or with the help of this knob, if we change it clockwise or anti-clockwise, to increase or decrease whatever the capacitance we want in the circuit, we increase or decrease. So its capacitance can be varied. So in a circuit, for example, in electronic circuit, computer circuit, or in radio, television, whatever the capacitance we require, with the help of the knob, we rotate it either clockwise or anti-clockwise for increasing or decreasing the capacitance. We can adjust the capacitance. But in case of paper capacitors and nickel capacitors, their value is fixed. We cannot change them. So variable capacitor, from the name you can see why whose capacitance can be varied. This is why it is called variable capacitor. I read the third paragraph is variable capacitor. In variable type of capacitor, some arrangement is made to change the area of the plate facing each other. It is generally a combination of many capacitors with air. We use in variable capacitors, we use air as a dielectric. As I told you, there are so many materials used for the dielectric, but in variable capacitor, we use the air as a dielectric, right? So in order to change its capacity, so many plates are changed. We change the area of the plates facing each other. It is generally combination of many capacitors. When air as a we use as a dielectric as a air. On a set remains while the other set can rotate. It's a variable capacitor. One end is fixed. This one end is fixed. Another one area can be changed. So in variable capacitor, we actually change the area, so its capacitance increase or decrease, right? So other type of capacitor is called electrolytic capacitor. So electrolytic capacitor is often used to store large amount of charge. You can see if we move further ahead, this is called electrolytic capacitors. So in electrolytic capacitors, they are used to store large amount of charge. The electrolytic capacitor is often used to store large amount of charge at relatively low voltage. If we give them low voltage, like small voltage, not 220 volt or 660 volt or 440 volt, it is a relatively low voltage. So they store a large amount of charge. Basically, I already told you that capacitors store the large. They are used for the storing the charge. So on the small voltage, a large amount of charge can be stored. In case it consists of a metal foil in contact with the electrolyte, a solution that conducts charge by virtue of motion of ion contained in it. When a voltage is applied between the foil and the electrolyte, a thin layer of metal oxide insulator is formed in the foil, and this layer serves as a dielectric. So very large capacitance can be attained because the dielectric layer is very thin. Since I told you there are the plates, and in plates, in between the plates, we use the dielectric. So these type of capacitors, these type of electrolytic capacitors are mainly used for the large capacitors. A large capacitance, so dielectric is used low voltage. They work on the low voltage and provide the large capacitance value. Okay, that's why they are used for different devices where the large amount of charge is needed. So actually, where we use capacitors. So capacitors. Now I'm going to discuss the uses of capacitors. So these are the uses of capacitors. Capacitors have wide range of applications. I am going to read on page number 83, uses of capacitors, where actually we use the capacitors. Why we have made this device? We have made this device for the storage of charge. So where we actually use, so I told you different types of capacitors are used in different devices. For example, capacitors have wide range of application in different electrical and electronic circuits. So first of all, here they use in electrical circuits. Electrical circuit they use in the fans. In your fans, we use the capacitors. Like these are the electrical circuits. So they are used in electronic circuit. Electronic circuit means computer and mobile phone. They are used for electronic circuit. For example, there are the used in tuning of transmitter, receive the transistor radio receiver and transistor radio. Before that, we have a receiver and transistor radio. They use in capacitors are used in these devices. They are also used in table fan. They use in table fan, ceiling fan, exhaust fan in your house, fan, motor in air conditioner. They use in air conditioner, cooler, motors, washing machines, air conditioner, and many other appliances of their smooth working. For the smooth burning, for your in your house, you have fan, table fan, ceiling fan, so roof fan. You have washing machine capacitors are used in washing machine capacitors are used in motor electric motor capacitors are used in ceiling fan, in table fan. So in television capacitors are used in radio capacitors are used. So in so many devices, capacitors have wide application. So capacitors are also used in electronic circuit and computer, etc. They use in electronic circuit. Electronic circuit could be anything like your LED bulb. This is the electric circuit is involved, so capacitors are used in it. Electronics circuit computer, they use in computers as well. Capacitors can be used to separate high frequency or low frequency signals, which make them useful in electronic circuits. In some electronic circuits, sometimes we require higher frequencies and sometimes we have require low frequencies. So if we want to separate out the higher frequency from the lower frequencies, excuse me, we use the capacitor. We use a different type of capacitor. Capacitors are used in resonance circuit that tune radios to the particular frequency. Have you seen the radio? There is a knob on the radio. If you move this, if you rotate the knob, so we can tune the radio. So, for example, in on radio we have FM 100 or so 102 FM 102. So if we want to adjust uh, the tuning of the radios. So we at the back end and we use the capacitors. So they first of all they use for to separate out low frequencies and high frequencies. They use in the radio for the tuning purpose, and they use in the computers and so many devices. They have vast application. Such circuits are called a tuning circuit because in radio we have a tuning circuit. This is called tuning circuit. One type of capacitor may not be suitable for all applications. Therefore, different types of capacitors have been developed. Why we made different types of capacitors? Because if we made one type of capacitor, for example, we use paper capacitors, and industry is making the paper capacitors, then it might be suitable for some particular application, but it might be not suitable for other applications or other devices. So that's why the company made different types of capacitors. They make mica capacitors, they make electrolytic capacitors, they make variable capacitors, they make paper capacitors for the application of different devices. They use for the application of different devices. To for the smooth running of the devices, we use different types of capacitors. So that's why capacitors are built for different applications. Different types of capacitors are built for different applications. So, student, this is the end of the maybe different types of capacitors. So I'm going to repeat for you know what we discussed today. We discussed today different types of capacitors in 13.8, 82, page number 82, topic 13.8, different types of capacitors. So I'm going to read for you because when we studied the parallel plate capacitor. When we studied, we have two metal plates and the dielectric is used, and this is called capacitor. And capacitor is used in different fields of life. So capacitors have two plates and the dielectric is used. Dielectric could be air, dielectric could be grease paper, dielectric could be mica, dielectric could be because these dielectrics are used in parallel plates. Yeah. Parallel, we have two plates and the dielectric is placed. So, if the paper capacitors have different types depending upon the construction and the nature of dielectric used. If we have a paper capacitor paper is used. So, why we roll them up to make it cylindrical, right? So, paper capacitor is an example of fixed capacitors, as we know fixed type of capacitor. The paper capacitor has a cylindrical shape. You can see this on figure 13.6. This is paper is used and aluminum foil. Aluminum foil is used. So between aluminum foil, we place the dielectric that is called paper. It could be grease paper or thin plastic sheet is used as dielectric between the two aluminum foil. The paper or plastic sheet is commonly rolled in the form of cylinder and is then enclosed into a plastic case. Then the whole assembly will be placed in the plastic case. So the two wires come out, two connection wires coming out from the capacitors for the sake of connection. Then we discussed about mica capacitor. You can see the figure 13.17 and 13.18. These are the other type of capacitor. This is called mica capacitor. So paper capacitor is a fixed type of capacitor. Because why? Because we cannot change its capacitance. Whatever the constructor had made its capacitance, we uh, we cannot change it. Like if we have made 10 microfarad capacitor, we cannot change it to 9 microfarad, 8 microfarad, 2 microfarad, or we cannot increase it to 12 microfarad, 7 microfarad, or 14 or 18 microfarad because when he had made the fixed type of capacitor. So and now mica capacitor is same as paper capacitor because we cannot change its capacitance of the mica capacitor like the paper capacitor. But in this case, a mica capacitor we use a different type of dielectric between the plates. That dielectric is called thin mica sheet because in that we use a thin mica sheet. That's why it is called mica capacitor. Okay. Since mica capacitor is very fragile, why mica is very fragile? Fragile means it can easily break out like the mirror is can fragile. So that's why it is placed in a very fragile. It is enclosed in a plastic case or case of some insulator. It is placed. This mica is placed in the insulator or in a plastic case. But then wires are coming out of mica capacitors. These are the wires which are coming out of the mica capacitors for the sake of connection or for the sake of use in the electronic circuits. Then we discussed other type of capacitor that is called the variable capacitor. Variable capacitor whose values, whose capacitance can vary, whose capacitance can be changed. So that's why it is from the name. This is called variable capacitor. In variable capacitor, what we use actually, in variable type of capacitor, some arrangement is made to change the area of the plate facing each other. So there are so many plates you can see. There are so many plates they are facing each other. These are the plates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are so many plates are placed facing each other. Why they are placed? So many plates are there in order to increase its vary its in order to vary its capacitance. In order to increase, sometimes we require more area, so we change the size of the plates. So capacitance we get more capacitance in the circuit. If we reduce the area of the plates facing each other, we reduce its capacitance. So there is a no place on this type of capacitor. There is a knob on this which can be rotated. This if we want to increase the, for example, in some circuit, electronic circuit, we want 14 microfarad or 15 microfarad, 15 microfarad capacitor. But in the paper capacitor and mega capacitor, we cannot change its capacitance. Whatever the capacitance, if it is made of 5 microfarad, we cannot change it. If mega capacitor, if it is made of 6 microfarad capacitor, we cannot change it. But in variable capacitors, if we want 15 microfarad in the circuit, electronic circuit, we move its knob and desired capacitance can be added into the electronic circuit. But for example, if we want 30 microfarad capacitance, with the help of variable capacitor, we can change the area of the plates, or we can increase its capacitance. Or if we change the area of the plates, its capacitance can be reduced, or we can, for example, in some circuit we require 5 microfarad. So by moving its anti-clockwise or clockwise direction, you have to see whether it's where its capacity is increasing, either rotating it clockwise or anti-clockwise. So you have to find this one. So the meters are also available which tells you the capacitance of how to measure the capacitance of the variable capacitor. So for example, in some electronic circuits we want 10 microfarad, but with the help of these two capacitors we cannot change it because their capacitance is fixed. But in this case, we can change the capacitance by adding the capacitor in the circuit. Okay, by changing by rotating the knob of knob of the capacitor. Another type of capacitor, which is called electrolytic capacitor. Electrolytic capacitors are actually used for the large capacitance, for more and more capacitance. For a bigger circuit, we want more capacitance. Then we use the mega capacitor, electrolytic capacitors. Electrolytic capacitors are actually this electrolytic capacitor is often used to store a large amount of charge at relatively low voltages. The figure you can see, the figure 13.2. 13.2 is the figure which you can this is the type of electrolytic capacitor. They use the less voltage and provide the more capacitance in the circuit. So this type of capacitor is called electrolytic capacitor. So now I studied the uses of capacitors. So capacitors have different uses in different devices. For example, they use in table fans, they use in ceiling fans, they use in exhaust fans, they use in air conditioner, cooler, motor, washing machine, air conditioner, many other appliances for the smooth working. So capacitors are actually used for so many devices: table fan, ceiling fan, exhaust fan, air conditioner, cooler, motor, washing machine, air conditioner, and many other appliances for the smooth working. Capacitors are also used in electronic circuits and computers. Electronic circuit, mobile phone, computer they use. Now we have SMD capacitors in because the size of the laptop is now getting smaller and smaller. That's why we don't use the bigger capacitors. We use the SMD capacitor now, which is only a point, very small size. Because if we place a bigger capacitor, the size will be increased. So when the technology has started, computer technology has started. So we first of all we use so many capacitors, bigger capacitors. But as the technology is getting advanced and advanced, so we are using SMD capacitor, SMD resistance nowadays. Capacitors can also be used to a high frequency and low frequency signals, which make the useful in electron circuit. In some electron circuits, we want to separate high frequency from the low frequency. So capacitors we use to separate out the high frequency from the lower frequency. Capacitors are used in the resonance circuit that tune up. They're used in the radio as well, because on radio you might have seen there's a knob on the radio. At the back of this knob, capacitor is used for the tuning purpose, for the tuning of the different stations on the FM or AM. One type of capacitor may not be suitable for other applications. Therefore, different types of capacitors have developed Why the developers make different types of capacitors? Because if we make the one type of capacitor all the time, they might be suitable for some circuit, they might not be suitable for other circuit. That's why the developers make different types of capacitors for different devices. So I hope the students will might understand everything what we discussed today in 13.8 different types of capacitor. If you still have questions regarding today's lecture, please feel free to ask questions. Thank you. So homework is, please remember the topic covered in today's lecture and write them down once on the draft register. Why I am giving you this homework in order to make sure you practice them or memorize them side by side. Thank you. If you still have questions regarding today's lecture, please feel free to ask questions. Thank you. Hello, Habibullah. Do you want to ask questions? Habibullah, did you understand? Unmute your mic and ask questions.